guys, we are continuing with the assembly of the chassis on Fiero Gray, as that's going to point us in the direction of what we're going to do with Fiero Blue, Fiero Red as far as the stance of the vehicle goes. So we have to finish everything up so we can get the bodies together, get everything to match, and see where the wheels are going to sit. So our next step in that is in step number 9, which is assembling the radiator. Now this kit, I've said it before and I'll say it again, for all its flaws, is very nicely detailed, as the radiator assembly itself is 3 separate parts. As you can see here, we have the radiator, the fan, and what goes for the fan shroud, I guess. That holds the fan there. It's very simple. You glue the fan to the, well, they call this the fan motor. It's basically, does hold the, I guess this would be the fan motor then. I mean, if we're looking at that. Right in the center there, and that's the bracket assembly that holds the motor. So that could be glued in there. Now the interesting thing of it is, you don't really have to glue it in there. It's got a small peg, and now if you just mount the fan to the peg on the correct side here, if I can just get it in there, and then you glue the motor assembly to the radiator, as would be the next step. The fan will be trapped there, and you'll actually have a rotating fan. Look at that. Now, will that matter because you'll never be able to use it or do anything with it? No, it's just kind of cool that you can actually do that. And then that goes attached to the 4th piece in this assembly, which is the radiator mounting bracket here that's already been glued to the lower side of the chassis. Now you're gonna have to line up your 2 radiator hoses, the 2 lines of the radiator, which for the other cars we're going to be making hoses and connecting it to the radiator just to make it look a little cooler, a little more realistic. For this, we're just going to leave it as the kit is designed, which the kit design is not a perfect solution, but hey, it'll work. So we're going to start gluing this together and mounting this up, and we'll be back as soon as we get it mounted. Alright, now we're going to start the assembly real quick and easy, so just hang out while I glue a couple of these items. And once all the accelerator dries, the finished assembly, the radiator, fan, and motor and shroud, I guess whatever you want to call it, actually looks pretty cool. You can see the engraving on the radiator is actually pretty nice. The tanks on the side. This is going to look really nice once it's painted up, this one little bit here. You can do quite a bit of detail painting there to make it look really, really nice. Okay. Now we're going to let that set up. We're going to mount it into the mounting bracket for the radiator there. Now, you can see the mounting bracket sits at an angle so that the radiator is pitched forward, as Fieros are bottom breathers. So the radiator is angled forward to allow air to come in from under the car up into the radiator, and the angle lets it have its optimum airflow. Because if it's sitting like this, the air is flowing up into the radiator, as opposed to sitting straight, being blocked by the nose and not getting as much airflow. Alright, so now we just have to mount the radiator here, make sure that the coolant lines are sitting in the right place, And we'll be pretty much set with this step 9. Alright guys, so there you can see the entire radiator assembly installed, which is actually chock full of some really cool details. Now the only thing I'm not too happy with is the placement of the radiator hoses. As you can see, this one just kind of stops here, and this one at least reaches the end of the radiator, so you can sort of put something there. But on the other cars, I'm going to have to modify that if I'm going to get a more realistic appearance. As if I remember right, and I think I do, this up hose, radiator hose, reaches up and comes down this way to this lower pipe. And this one, I don't really remember, but I do remember that one. So we're going to be making a hose on the other cars to reach up and entering the radiator here, which means we'll have to modify the radiators quite a bit on the other cars. So that'll be something interesting to see if we can get that done. But you can see there's a lot to look at in here, as there's a lot of individual parts, or at least it looks like there's a lot of individual parts in there. And we're still not finished yet. It still has a few more things which need to go in the front. But for now, we're going to skip a couple of steps, and we're going to move on to step 11, which is going to cover the rear section of the car so that we can get that done and installing all of the parts in there. Okay, step 11 is going to involve installing the rear firewall, which I don't understand why that was made as a separate part. That didn't really make any sense to me. The battery and what they call a condenser, which is not a condenser. It's actually the charcoal canister for the evap system. So we're going to be installing these 3 parts, and then moving on to the one part we're really interested in, which is putting the wheels on it. And for those of you who are real sticklers for detail, don't know if you guys can make that out there, but this is an AC Delco battery. Check that out. Which is the original battery supplier for these cars. And that's a neat little detail which they chose to include in there. In order to get the battery to fit correctly, it's going to have to sit not exactly straight, as there's a little bit of a clearance issue between the battery and the firewall. So what we're going to do is, once we install the firewall, we're going to put a little bit of glue on the back of the battery and just have it attached directly to the firewall. We are done with everything except the brakes on the chassis, and then we can install the wheels and tires. So we're going to let this set up for a while, let it all just harden and cure, and then we'll be back. Then we're going to have to put a little more of the gray primer on the front here, just to even things out, and everything should work perfectly. Alright, we're going to continue with step 11, which is installing the brake rotors and calipers, which you can see come as one piece. You see they have 2 mounting holes, and you can only see the caliper from one side, which is the side that will be facing outward, not toward the wheel, but inward. Well, not outward, but inward toward the car, not toward the wheel. Now you have these 2 holes here to mount the caliper, to mount the rotor. Now they attach to the two holes that are on the spindle here. And with the caliper facing outward, pretty much have to just align the spindle to the hub and the small pin here on the bottom, which seems to have a little fitment problem. I may have to enlarge the hole there. As we have a little bit of an issue. Fitting that lower pin. As you can see, it's not really aligned very well with the hole in the rotor, so we're gonna have to enlarge those holes there in order to make sure everything fits. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright guys, we're putting together the final parts of the chassis, which are the brakes. And just notice something about the front brakes. As I showed before, the front brake rotors have two holes in them. These are one is for the hub on the spindle, and the other is for a locator pin that is right underneath. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. Right underneath the hub of the spindle. Now, when I first installed the subframe and all the steering gear and everything, I attached the lower control arm to the spindle to give it a much more realistic appearance. Apparently, when you do that, you bring the hub and that locator pin too close together. And that is what's causing my interference with the brake rotor. As now the locator pin underneath the hub is too close to the hub and the brake rotor won't fit, even if I open up the hole, and I can't open it any more than that, or I'm going to either break out through the bottom of the rotor or cut right into the hub. So, quick and easy answer to fix that was just to cut off that lower locating pin like I did here, and then just mount the brake rotor, and problem solved. So we're going to do that on this side, mount this brake rotor, and then we'll be ready to put the tires on. Alright, so now we have both front brake rotors installed, the rear installed, everything done in the engine compartment is done. Whether it's accurate or not really the point. So next step we're going to go into is back to step 10 to install the wheels. The wheels are a 3-piece assembly. Involve your hub, your wheel back, and your rim. Tires are nice vinyl tires, hollow. Okay, now you're supposed to leave these free so that the wheels will spin, so the hubs do not get glued in and the wheel back gets glued to the wheel itself. And then I guess we can just slide the wheel over it. Now we're just going to go ahead and do the rest. So hang out for a second. Okay, now this is interesting. I found that we have Goodyear and BF Goodrich tires for this car from my stack of tires, which I didn't realize that they came with 2 different types. We're going to stick with the BF Goodrich. we have our wheel and tire package together. So now it's as simple as just gluing them to the hubs, and our wheels and tires will be done. And that one apparently seems to want to just stay there. Okay. So now we're just going to glue the hubs there, and we'll be done with that. Alright guys, we finally have the completed finished chassis. Everything's installed now, including the wheels and tires. And they even roll, as I was determined to make every feature operate the way it would, or the way it was intended to, by MPC, as that's the way they would show a test shop model. Now, one thing that, if I were building this for any other reason other than being a test shop model, that I would fix is this. You see that? There's a lot of slop in the wheels because there's a gap in the hub between the inner wheel and the outer wheel. And that would require inserting a spacer, probably, if we look at the instructions here, we can insert a spacer to make this a little bit wider till it contacts the outer portion of the wheel, and that would eliminate the sloppiness and the play that we have here. Now, shortening the mounting pegs did fix our mounting issue and eliminated some of the slop that's in it, but there's still a bit there, and that would require reworking the hubs themselves and taking up the extra space that's in there just to stiffen the wheels up. Now, that's not something that I'm gonna do, but when I build my next one of these, I will be taking that into account. And for Fiero Red and Blue over there, you can see their chassis. There are going to be some major changes made to the suspension to get the car to sit correctly. So I'm going to mount the body now so that we can see exactly where it sits. Alright, we'll be back in a minute. Alright guys, here we have it with wheels installed and the body mocked up. And yep, it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. The car sits way too high and the wheels stick out way too much. This is basically the way, and one side the wheels stick out further than the other. So for Fiero Blue and Fiero Red, that's going to require quite a bit of work to fix this. Now the body will be just a hair lower once it's glued together. That's right now it's just sitting on the chassis. So you'll get a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit closer, a little bit to the tires. But no, I am really not happy with, never have been with this kit, with the way it sits on its wheels and tires. No, I am not going to change it on this, since this is a test shot build. But I am most definitely going to make those changes on any other versions of this car that I build for myself or for anyone else. So here you have it. It's slowly coming together. We'll put that on there. Let's just see what it all looks like. And other than the stance of the car, it really does look nice when it comes together. But yeah, I am really, really not happy with that. And it's a very similar issue that I had with the cutaway Fiero. As I know, part of the problem with the stance of this car is that it's only got half a body on it, so it's a little hard to get everything to mount up. But it still has the wobbly wheels, same as this one. And that's just based on the type of wheel mounting that they decided to use on this car, which can be fixed easily. So as you can see, at first glance, the car does look nice, but then you start looking at the stance of it, and that's really where it bugs me. And the fact that this wheel here is sticking out so much further than the other, I'm going to have to look into that. Let's see what's going on there. Alright guys, so we're going to leave it there. And now that we've got our answers as to what we need to do, we're going to move on to the chassis of Fiero Red and Blue next. And we're going to start making some changes. In order to correct all of the flaws there are in the way this car sits. Alright guys, I'm going to leave it at that, and I will see you on the next one.